Okay, I have heard a leftist actually use the same logic. So I'm not the first one to like use it, but I didn't read when I made it up. When I made it up, I didn't know it was a thing, and I might have subconsciously learned it from TV, maybe if anything. But I've named it something cool, and the logic, the wording itself is mine. Like, and it comes with like an analogy as well, like a visual way of looking at it. So origin problem solution is, in order to figure out how to solve a problem, you first need to figure out how the problem was first caused or created. If you don't know what caused or created the problem, it can affect your ability to find solutions to the problem. So the visual representation is like a specifically designed maze where you basically got to, well, you know what a maze looks like, innit? Well, usually it's just like, is that okay? Is that a type of maze where you got to find your way to the center and then find your way out? I can't remember what I've seen mazes like that in the past, or whether it's like you gotta go in one side and come out the other. Like that's the usual one. You go in one side and come out the other. But with this visual aid, this visualization. And by the way, side note, the reason why I like visual aids and visual diagrams and something visual is because I learn better visually as a dyslexic with my dyslexia. So that's why I like visual aids anyway. So the visual aid is you've got like a maze, and you basically got to find your way. Well, there's one entrance, and you got to find your way to the center. And when you find your way into your center, you got to then find your way back out. So the idea is in order to get to the center of the maze, you have to basically take certain turns, certain directions, like, and eventually you're going to end up at the center of the maze. And once you're inside the maze, this is an actual little bit of detail because logically I'm thinking about a problem. Once you get inside the maze, you gotta basically find a way of sort of like shaking your memory a little bit. So, look, like when I daydreamed about being in this maze, I'm thinking that as you get into the maze, you basically spin yourself around just to kind of like jog your memory a bit, and then you stop. And then what you got to do is you basically got to remember every single turn you made to get into this center problem. Because the maze represents a problem, so the problem maze is called. So you've got to basically remember the turns that you made to get the directions, the decisions, the actions, the behaviors you took to get to the turns you took to get to the center. You've got to remember them, and you've got to basically do them in reverse in order to get yourself out of the maze. And so when you get yourself into the center of the maze, you've created a problem. When you get outside of the maze by retracing your steps, you find an exit to the maze. And this is basically a visual representation of an idea of how problems themselves work in themselves. And so the idea is problems are basically created down to like wrong decisions, wrong behaviors, wrong actions, or wrong turns that you made. And when you committed to these negative behaviors, actions, and decisions, you essentially create a problem for yourself. And in order to figure out how to solve that problem, you need to reverse what you did wrong in order to solve the problem. And this is theoretically Now, it could be complicated, and not all problems might work like this, but theoretically, this is how all problems work. Is that usually, I think most of the time, problems are created when we make mistakes, when we do things wrong. And to correct those mistakes is about undoing the mistakes that we did. And in a sense, kind of doing them in reverse. Like, if you develop bad habits, what did I say that? Yeah, if you develop bad habits, it's because you committed to bad behaviors. If you want to create good habits, you have to start adopting and committing to good habits and good behaviors. So therefore, you would have solved the problem of bad behavior and bad habits. It was like obesity. Obesity is created when you eat too much food and you eat too much junk food at the same time without exercising. So what you do, you go on a diet and then you exercise, and you get a trainer to help you. And so when it comes to immigration, if you want to solve the immigration, putting a band-aid on it, which in the example of immigration, becoming isolationist and closing your borders doesn't actually solve the immigration problem at all. You're just putting a band-aid on the problem, and then you're ignoring the problem. And ignoring a problem doesn't go away. You've got to acknowledge the problem in order for you to solve the problem. Ignoring problem doesn't make the problem go away. It just makes it worse. It just makes the problem get worse and worse and worse. So this is how you solve problems. Or this is and what I missed is this is one of my universal problem solutions. The origin problem solution featuring the problem is how to solve problems through reversing the things that you did wrong. So yeah, that's the philosophy of one of the universal problem solutions of which is this one is origin problem solution featuring the problem is. And yes, I repeated myself. Maybe I'll explain it. The reason why I repeated myself is because I was in a logical circle where I kept on reiterating what I wanted to explain. And then when you keep on reiterating things you're trying to explain, you keep on repeating the same things. But I got stuck in repeating the exact same thing with very little changing. Or that's how it usually works. So the only way to basically end the circle is you gotta realize it's happening, and you gotta think, wait a second, I'm stuck in a logical circle. I'm stuck in a logical trap. So I just need to realize it and just stop. And then once you realize it, you've trapped yourself inside the circle. Usually realize then how to explain it properly. It's kind of you figure it on the go logically as you're going, and you're figuring it out as you go along. And that's another thing with problems, is that logical circular trap. It happens when it comes to Hajjal, right, and Glaser, right. I don't want to say those words because they can be considered buzzwords. It's when it comes to religious extremism, for example. The thing that actually radicalizes people into religious extremism and violence is actually discrimination. And that's according to an expert I was listening to on the radio once. So if you think, hurting them, taking their lives away is going to actually make them become less extreme, you're not. You're actually being discriminatory to them, and you're actually going to make the problem worse. And then what you're basically creating is you have an endless circle of violence. You might have heard about this type of thing before, or this thing about thing. I'm inspired by this thing, where the only way to end the circle is by cutting it, cutting it and ending it and breaking it apart. It's like the snake biting its own tail. The only way to end the problem is by literally separating the snake from its tail. And then you solve the problem. So I didn't actually, when I mentioned that circle thing, the logical circle trap, it didn't click straight away. That wasn't intentional for problem solving. But I basically realized mid-speech that it's problem solving. And basically what you just realized there, actually what you realized there is me figuring things out on the fly, because this isn't prepared, and thinking about things logically. See, what it's called is, I call it the automated mind. And automated mind, it's not only happens when you have OCPD, but it happens when, if you practice logic so long, eventually you become kind of good at it, when it comes to using reasoning, making logical connections, and eventually you train your brain to start doing it automatically. So you train your brain to start doing it automatically, yeah. So because I've basically been creating philosophy and practicing reasoning since I was 14, I've basically spent 14 years now. Like it's been an extra year. It was 13 years last year. Now I think it's around 14 years. And do the maths for me. I was 24 when I started creating philosophy and using reasoning, and now I'm 38. That's 14 years, isn't it? And if you want to actually have an estimate of how much I've thought about things, I could think anything up to an hour a day, right? How many hours are there in a week? No, how many? Well, an hour a day, up to an hour a day. Sometimes I can think more. Sometimes I can think less. But if I go by an hour a day, it'll end up rounding itself off and compensating for logical errors and estimation problems. But eventually it comes around into being balanced. So going by an hour a day is a good thing. And how many? Well, an hour a day, and so like how many days in a year? 365. And you can do this on your calculator right now. What's 365 times 14? Type that into your calculator. You will get an estimate of how much logically I've thought about things in the last 14 years. And FYI, it's over 5,000 hours. And they say you take, like the saying goes, you need to practice something 1,000 times before you get good. So if I've practiced reasoning, so originally I practiced reasoning for 1,000 hours. I've practiced reasoning for 5 times the amount. And because of my OCPD, which is down to problems with mental control, my brain thinks about things all the time. And with all this practicing reasoning, I've developed this automated mind ability where my brain can actually create logic and use reasoning on its own automatically. I tend to say it feels as if my mind has a will of its own, and that's kind of like what it means to have OCPD. But everybody has a certain degree of this automated mind ability. And there's 2 versions of the automated mind. There's automated mind version 1, which is anything your brain does automatically, which would be neuroscience, isn't it? But I haven't studied neuroscience, so I don't know all the ways in which your brain does things automatically. But version 2 is the automated mind ability. Actually, no. I think version 2 is the maths part I was about to explain. Version 3 is the automated mind ability when it comes to using reasoning and logic. And the reason why that is because first neurology comes first, then maths becomes after, and then the automated mind with reasoning comes third. So everybody has a certain level of degree of automated mind when it comes to maths. Like with me, it's like, what's 2 plus 2? 4. What's 4 plus 4? 8. What's 8 plus 8? 16. What's 16 times 2? 32. What's 2 times 32? 64. See, that's my limited automated mind ability. What else can I do? 4, 8, 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28, 32, 36, 40, 44, 48. Not pretty sure I did that correct, but that's an example of automated mind maths version. So automated mind version 2. Everybody can do maths. Everybody has automated mind ability when it comes to maths to a certain degree. Yeah. and I developed it logically, the third version, which I just call it the automated mind ability. And I can't remember. And I went a little bit on well, it's called a pivot politically. When you're talking mid-speech and you change your direction, it's called a pivot. Or like if you sometimes it's done as a logical error where you realize that you logically can't go any further with more arguments, so you kind of pivot and you change the direction of the conversation. But in general, it is called a pivot when you go into something else. But the reason why I do it is because it's a part of OCPD, where my brain goes off in all these different directions because of that's how OCPD with problems with mental control works. And this has been a good video, me going on to different philosophies, giving you a little bit of biography philosophy, where you combine a philosophy with a life story, and you've had a little bit of that in the video. You've learned about problem solving, or other origin problems. Other ones of my other universal problem solutions I've created. So you got origin problem solution. In order to figure out how to solve a problem, you at first need to figure out how the problem was first caused and created. Then it's a matter of undoing the things you did wrong in order to solve the problem. Communication is the second one, because we don't have psychic ability. We don't have a hive mind or a god mind. All our minds are isolated from one another. So in order to share information, we need to communicate verbally or through technology, through messaging, like emailing, texting, videos, audio. So second one is communication. The third one is finding balance between two sides of oneself, finding balance between your mind and emotion to find truth in the world. That's another universal problem. There might be at least one or two more, but I can't remember them on the spot without going on my list on my phone. And I don't want to do that because I want to end the video abruptly. Never works. But anyway, I'm done. I'm done.